Meeting will come to order. We are now holding our regularly scheduled meeting held Tuesday, September 15th, 2009, 9 a.m. And at this time, I'd like to call on Pastor Greg Simstrot. Did I say that right, Pastor?
You got it right.
Thank you, sir.
Close enough.
First, Pastor with First Church of God to give the invocation, and Commissioner O'Brien to give the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you.
Let's pray. Father, we come this morning, first thing in the morning, calling upon your name. Jesus, when your disciples came to you and said, teach us how to pray, you made it very clear. You told them that you should ask God each day for your daily bread. Obviously, you were saying you need to pray in the morning. And Lord, this morning we've come first thing to pray and to ask you for our daily bread. Not just physical substance, Lord, but really for wisdom and discernment. I pray for these leaders over our community and ask that you would guide them in their thoughts, guide them in their discernments, guide them with wisdom and understanding. Father, give them strength to make the tough calls. Give them understanding so that they can consider all aspects of the decision. Give them, Lord, strength that they would be able to stand up against what would be popular with some, but would not be right for all. And I pray, God, that you would just guide their hands. You are a sovereign Lord, and there is no authority on earth, the Scripture says, that slips by your hand. You allow all governments to sit. And Lord, you're asking each one of us to look to you for the right choices and decisions over our community. So give these, our leaders, that understanding. And Lord, may they carry the humility to recognize that it's not their authority, but it is a delegated authority from you that they carry, and that the people of our community have trusted them with. And Lord, bless each of these who are serving. Bless them richly in their personal lives. Bless them as they serve this community. And may the community be favored by you, because we consider you first and foremost. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That was a good one.
Thank you very much, Pastor Simstrot, for coming down, giving the invocation. Okay, at this time we will turn to, we have additions or deletions. And Commissioners, I'd like to add an emergency item if I could, and it's just regarding the consolidation of the water, sewer, and irrigation services. And any other modifications? Seeing none, we've got a motion to approve the agenda as amended. Motion from Commissioner Wheeler, second from Commissioner Flesher. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. Next moves us to proclamations and presentations. Presentation A is designating September 14th through the 18th as 2009 as Industry Appreciation Week in Indian River County. Commissioner O'Brien, you will be presenting.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Linda, you want to come on up? Colleen, did you want to come up as well? Or Linda Gonzalez Schlitt, who is our chair of both our Economic Development Council and our Economic Development Division, and Helene Castletine is the county's Economic Development Officer. This is a proclamation designating September 14th through the 18th, 2009 as Industry Appreciation Week in Indian River County, Florida. Whereas business and industry in Indian River County is increasingly vital to the health of our community, and whereas while we struggle with the current economic conditions, the sustainability of Indian River County's existing industries is key to a prosperous future. And whereas the future expansion of these industries will account for the majority of new high-wage and high-skilled jobs created in our county, and whereas our existing industries help sustain the quality of life and a solid tax base in Indian River County, and whereas public knowledge of the contributions made by industry is essential to the maintenance of a good community-industry relationship, and whereas Governor Christ recognizes the important contributions made by Florida manufacturers by declaring the week of September 14th through the 18th, 2009 as Industry Appreciation Week in Florida. And whereas all residents are urged to take a moment to salute Indian River County industries and employees for the contributions they make in our community. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County, Florida, that the week of September 14 through 18, 2009 be designated as Industry Appreciation Week in Indian River County, adopted this 15th day of September 2009, signed by all 5 county commissioners. Linda?
Well, thank you very much. We'll present this to the membership at our annual Industry Appreciation Luncheon, which was a sellout and record crowd and record time this year. We'd also particularly like to thank the commissioners this year for the proactive initiatives that you've adopted to assist in recruiting businesses and expanding businesses in this community. It's been, a tough year, tough couple of years, but I feel certain that these are going to really pay off in the future, and it definitely makes us a lot more competitive in the state. So thank you very much for all of your actions.
You're welcome. Good. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Keep on going, Linda. That's just Linda.
Next, we have the presentation of proclamation designating the month of September as Sickle Cell Awareness Month. Commissioner Wheeler, you'll present.
Is Michelle Hall here?
Mike.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Either way, yes, sir. Welcome, Mr. Hall.
Yeah, welcome. This is a proclamation designating the month of September as Sickle Cell Awareness Month. Whereas sickle cell is the most common hereditary genetic blood disorder, although predominantly affecting members of the darker races, is a global disease and affects persons of all backgrounds, nationalities, and ethnicities. Whereas Sickle Cell Foundation of Palm Beach County and Treasure Coast, Inc., is a community-based, nonprofit, tax-exempt organization that seeks to improve the quality of life for persons with sickle cell disease or sickle cell trait and members of their families. And whereas, in addition to the education and community awareness, services include screening, counseling, family support groups, normalization and socialization activities, providing information and education to parents of newborns who test positive for sickle cell trait. Now therefore be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners, Indian River County, Florida, that the month of September 2009 be designated as National Sickle Cell Awareness Month in Indian River County, and calls upon the people of Indian River County to join their fellow citizens across the United States in recognizing and participating in this special observance. And it's adopted this 15th day of September and signed by all 5 county commissioners. Thank you, Michael. Would you like to say something?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. On behalf of the Sickle Cell Foundation of West Palm Beach and the Treasure Coast, we sincerely appreciate this proclamation. Sickle cell disease is a very debilitating disease and affects a lot of the constituents. And we are here to try to educate as well as help the families that are affected by this disease that a lot of times is misunderstood. So any way that we can get the word out is very much appreciated. And we are in the Treasure Coast area from Martin all the way through Indian River County now, and look forward to helping anybody that needs our help that is affected by this disease.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, our next proclamation is a proclamation designating the month of September 2009 as Workforce Development Month in Indian River County. Commissioner Flesher to present.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Wendell Thompson, come on down. I see you have the Workforce Solutions crew. If you'd like to invite them up, come on down to receive this proclamation.
Lee?
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I have the distinct privilege and honor to present this proclamation designating the month of September 2009 as Workforce Development Month in Indian River County, Florida. Whereas meaningful employment is fundamental to maintaining a healthy and vibrant economy, as well as to providing Floridians with a sense of self-worth and contribution to their families and communities. And whereas the people of Florida are in the greatest asset and vital to the ability to expand economic opportunities and firmly establish the Sunshine State as the global leader in the 21st century. And whereas the dedicated men and women who support the workforce talents needs of the state of Florida through the state workforce development system, which includes Workforce Florida Incorporated, the Agency for Workforce Innovation, 24 regional workforce boards, and nearly 90 one-stop career centers, working with businesses, education, labor, economic development, government, community-based, and other critical partners, and are committed to assisting our state during these extraordinary economic times and providing exemplary career training and employment assistance to more than 1 million Floridians annually. Whereas Florida's workforce system continues to serve as a national model for the innovation and has been recognized with honors such as an International Economic Development Council Excellence Award for initiatives including the Employ Florida Banner Centers, which serve as statewide go-to resources for developing cutting-edge training and industry input to bolster skilled talent in sectors in the diversity of Florida's economy. And whereas the volunteer leaders and workforce professionals within the state workforce system remain firmly committed to the top priority of helping unemployed Floridians get back to work and assisting those who are employed with advancing within their professions while maintaining the system's demand-driven, business-led focus and strengthening Florida's talent supply chain to secure a more sustainable and vibrant economic future for our state. Now therefore be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County, Florida, that the month of September 2009 be designated as Industry Appreciation Week and in Indian River County, adopted this 15th day of September, signed by all 5 county commissioners.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. I just want to say on behalf of the Board of Directors of Workforce Solutions and all of the Workforce Solutions staff, as well as our counterparts around the state, thank you very much for this proclamation. I know the more than 37,000 residents of the Treasure Coast right here, the Research Coast. Thank you also for recognizing that the workforce is important to Florida's economy. I'm sure they appreciate your support. Also, with the 9,300 people currently unemployed here in Indian River County, we very much appreciate your proactive stance towards job creation. Thank you so much for supporting our system. We appreciate being here today.
Thank you, Linda. Thanks for all y'all's work.
You're welcome.
If there's ever a time whenever the community needs your services, now's the time. Thank you for being there.
Yes, thank you. You're welcome. I'd like to introduce the people that are with me, if I may.
Yes.
Okay. To my right, Kathy McKenzie. She's the chairwoman of Workforce Solutions. Directly behind her, Helene Castletine, which all of you know. Helene's one of our major partners and also sits on the Workforce Solutions Board of Directors. This is Marcelo Dos Santos. He's your branch manager here in Indian River County and works very closely with local businesses in seeing that they get the type of workforce they need. And Joe Coakley, he's a recruiter for our system, business services consultant. He recently got promoted because he's so good. But anyway, he works also directly with businesses in the community in helping them connect with the types of workers that do the work they need. So just thank you very much. It's a pleasure being here today.
Thank you.
Gwenda, would you like to take the opportunity to maybe perhaps give a plug about your great location out west and the newest addition to Workforce Solutions?
Certainly. We have a new service center out on 82nd Avenue. What's the address there, Marcel?
1880 82nd.
1880? 1880 82nd Avenue.
Suite 102.
Suite 102. It will be open in about another week, I believe.
Yes.
Fully open to the public. It will be a place for the public to come in and use the job banks, get some career counseling, referrals to jobs, and so forth. So we haven't had a center that's open to the universal population now for quite some time. We had to close the center here last year because of budget cuts. But with the new stimulus dollars, we have an opportunity to at least open a center for a while, if not permanently. Our goal is to make it permanent, but funding will dictate whether or not we can keep it open. If the public uses it, it helps justify it. So please come out and see us and see if we can't help you connect with that job you need.
And is there a telephone number that folks can call if they want to know a little bit more about Workforce Solutions?
Yeah, Commissioner, that'd be, it's 1-800 for you to hire is that number. And of course, they always can go to our website, which is yourworkforcesolutions.com.
Okay. Thank you.
Also, employers, if they are interested in listing a job with us, they can also call that same number. We need jobs for people. We have more than 9,300 people unemployed here in Indian River County. So employers, if they would call that 1-866 for you to hire number, someone will be there to assist them in entering a job order. Or they can go online at www.employflorida.com and enter a job order there as well.
No cost.
Oh, of course, and board members are reminding me, all of it is at no cost. This is a complimentary service, so we invite both employers and job seekers to take advantage of what we have to offer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Like I'm at a wedding.
Famous ceremony.
Thank you, sir. Billy, thank you.
That concludes our proclamations presentations. There are no minutes to be approved and nothing under the information item, so that moves us to the consent agenda. Anything you'd like to have pulled, Commissioners?
Move approval.
Got a motion to approve the consent agenda from Commissioner Wheeler with a second from Commissioner Flesher. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. Next, we have the public hearing, the emergency ordinance granting temporary use permit, CDS Manufacturing for temporary industrial site.
Mr. Chairman, this proposal was put on as an emergency manner, and the concept is that there's a site on State Road 60 that had been used to as a staging site for the construction of State Road 60. The proposal is to use the same site as a temporary industrial site with a temporary use permit to enable a manufacturing company to, as I understand it, to prefabricate some bridge structures that would be used in the Martin County Bridge, which is one of the stimulus projects on the Treasure Coast. The ordinance we put in front of you attempted to identify that this use, as it's industrial, would not be allowable in a consistent manner with our comprehensive plan or land development regulations were it to be a permanent use, but was to recognize that as a temporary use which would terminate when the bridge was completed, it would be eliminated at that point and the land would revert to the uses consistent with a comprehensive plan. An ordinance is prepared to make some legislative findings along these lines, and as attached to the ordinance is a draft application for a temporary use permit. The intent was that the attachment, the temporary use permit, along with a site plan that would be associated with it, would be the approval through ordinance of a temporary use permit. But as of last night, we did not have a completed application. Maybe Mr. Glenn, if you've got something, you could speak to that a little more.
We just received actually a updated and a true attachment A, no longer a draft, so I will hand that out.
Thank you, George.
Thank you, George.
Thank you, George.
Has the planning staff been able to look at this exhibit, and are you satisfied you can work with it in terms of the site plan?
Yes, Stan Bowling, Planning Director, and we have reviewed the application, reviewed the sketch a little bit earlier, and this is a properly filled out temporary use permit form and sketch, very similar to the use that was there before for the State Road 60 project. And we have the check.
But sometimes that matters, sometimes it doesn't. Has it cleared, I guess, is the question. Sometimes that comes before us.
And I'd also like to note that in the ordinance on page 182, we have a number of recitals that are intended to be legislative findings by the board that are incorporated into the ordinance by section 1 of the ordinance, which reflects the requirement for development orders and land uses to be consistent with the plan, reciting that if it was a permanent use, it would be inconsistent, stating that the use is temporary and it's a direct result of the international, national, and local economic emergencies, stating the local unemployment rate most recently in Indian River County was 15%, and that this temporary use will create up to 40 new jobs, stating that the federal stimulus program has prioritized shovel-ready construction projects, and that the Indian Street Bridge in Martin County was the #1 stimulus project by Florida DOT for the state. That project will require temporary facilities such as a casting yard to be located in the Treasure Coast, and the subcontractor has identified a site in Indian River County, which was the former State Road 60 staging site, and that this temporary use permit will terminate upon completion of the bridge, and passing the ordinance as an emergency ordinance promotes the economic recovery consistent with national and local objectives while maintaining the comprehensive land use plan consistency when the temporary use project is completed, and that this temporary use permit is in the best interest of the public health, safety, and welfare. I would also note that as an emergency ordinance, this was discussed last week but not advertised the normal 10 days before hearing, so it would require a 4/5 vote to be passed. So I think at this point you should open up the public hearing and proceed from there.
What I'd like to do first, if I could, is to open to any questions from the commissioners or comments before we open this up to the public hearing.
John?
Yes, Commissioner Solari.
There are a lot of whereases here, but I'd like to add two more that are implied, but just to get them out there. And one would be, whereas this temporary use will have a significant positive economic impact for Indian River County, and whereas we are now suffering from the worst economic conditions since before World War II. Just like those conditions in there if possible.
Okay.
And I'll also note, it's not in the backup, but the information we had last year showed that this would probably have an initial impact of roughly $7 to $7.5 million in the county.
Okay. Any other comments or questions, commissioners? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the meeting and then open back up public hearing. This time, is there anybody from the public that wishes to address this issue? Mr. Johnson, welcome.
Bob Johnson, Corwin Subdivision. I have no objection to temporary emergency. However, there's one area that I do have concern with, and that is the proper notification of residents that are around the subject site that are going to. I think they ought to be notified that what's going on, and they ought to have a voice in what's being said without this sort of going under the radar screen.
What kind of radius would you suggest, Bob? Because there's probably a good 10-mile radius of no people around it.
Well, I do know, like on roads, or public notification, I was notified, like by the state, that they put a notice in the Jensen Beach newspaper to notify people of particular on a situation. I think it was Route 60, and so I just want to make sure that that people are notified that are around this site, that they know what's going on. I'm sure there's no problem.
Mr. Chairman, Stan, could you throw on the screen aerial of the site, and that might help Mr. Johnson, because I don't think there's any real adjacent property owners out there.
And if I'm not mistaken, this sits on the owner of the property owns 1,000 acres right there in that area, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, that's the size of and scope of remoteness that we're talking about with this, Mr. Johnson.
Right. On the document camera shows County Road 512 and the intersection with State Road 60 going to the left and right. The actual area under discussion is the area that's cleared, and the aerial shows this site after it was used for the State Road 60 project. And so the cleared area is the area that would be used for this proposed temporary use, and that area is hundreds and hundreds of feet within the boundary of the property under the applicant's ownership. So it's remote even from the perimeters of this site, the site boundaries, and it's a great distance from any residents out there. It's a remote site. I think that even from State Road 60, you won't see the activities on the site. You'll just see the trucks coming and going from the site.
Okay. Anybody else wish to address this? Welcome, Mr. Tripson.
Jens Tripson, 2525 14th Street, Vero Beach. I think this is a win-win situation for the county all the way around. We'll get jobs for the life of the project for 2 to 3 years. The site's been impacted. It's going to be kind of a similar use involving concrete. Please vote for it. Thank you.
Okay. Welcome, Brian.
Good morning, gentlemen. Brian Carmen, Executive Director, Indian River Neighborhood Association. I'd like to congratulate Commissioner O'Brien for out-of-the-box thinking here, looking for ways in which we can indeed try to mitigate the untenable unemployment situation we have. Again, as Mr. Jensen said, this is win-win. I've been out to the site. It's scarified land. It's previously being used. With the terms of the ordinance, it fences off the problem of that setting a precedent. So, again, win-win. The IRNA is very much in support of this and congratulates Commissioner O'Brien for taking the lead on this and encourages the commissioners to adopt the ordinance. Thank you.
Gentlemen, you have your marching orders. Okay. Any other comments?
Linda Gonzalez. Just wanted to indicate that the Economic Development Division of the Chamber was in favor, as well as the Economic Development Committee for the county. Both took positions that they felt that this was a great win-win for the county.
Okay. Any other public comment? Seeing none, we'll close public comment, reconvene the meeting. Okay, Commissioners, any questions or comments before?
Mr. Chairman, just one more thing to clear up. This will not be a cement batch plant. They're going to be using our local existing cement companies, their ready mix, and just be pouring the cement and molds out on site. So it won't be like a concrete batch plant. I'd also like to take this minute here to really thank staff for working hard on this. Bob Keating, Stan Bowling, and George Glenn. I think this is a great example of where government, we kind of said, hey, we can fall back on bureaucracy and say we're not going to do this, or we can put our minds to it and say we will find a way to get this done. So I want to thank Bob and Stan and George for really stepping up and coming through and working hard to make this happen. So I really appreciate everything you guys did on this. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the legislative findings as amended by Commissioner Slory, and to approve the emergency ordinance as presented.
Second.
Got a motion from Commissioner O'Brien with a second from everybody, but we'll have to take it from Commissioner Solari.
One comment,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman. I think the county may want to look at, when this gets up and rolling, putting some signs out on both sides that heavy trucks will be moving in and out. It's a 4-lane now. It's a long stretch with nothing to calm traffic or slow it down. And I think probably for even liability, we ought to have it marked that heavy trucks will be moving in and out of that area, so people will at least have the ability to realize that and slow down.
Yeah, and just to elaborate on this a little bit more, one of the parties involved in this called me early on in this, went down and spoke to the community development department, and their answer was no. And I said, well, then you got to ask, well, why can't you? And they stated what the ordinance was, and then it was clear to me what needed to take place. And of course, obviously being in favor of economic development, I knew that we could do this to make this work. And then Commissioner O'Brien comes along and asks the same question right behind me and says, how can we? And I really do appreciate you stepping up to the plate on this, realizing it takes 3 votes to get most things done, but in this instance 4 votes because of the emergency nature of this. And this is a really good, in my opinion, symbol of government being able to modify ordinances so that we can be able to be fast on our feet, not to get around any kind of advertising, not to undo any land development regulations, but simply to make it so that we can provide jobs for those that need them in the community, as well as simply do a little bit of common sense.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I don't want to leave the impression that staff is, obviously they've worked hard in not being uncooperative, because when we ask staff what we can do, they interpret the rules and policies that we make and give us answers based on that. So I think the process worked, and I just don't want to leave the impression that staff was opposed to this for the sake of being opposed to it. They're opposed to it because of our policies that have been set by the board in the past. So, but I agree with what you're saying. I congratulate staff and you and Peter and everybody else that worked on this. I think it's a positive thing.
No, and I'm not saying that staff gave us, I mean, basically, we had an ordinance that didn't allow this, and now we have an ordinance that allows this.
Right.
And that's a good thing, especially when we can do it this fast. Okay. All right, we have a motion on the floor. Any further discussion? Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The motion passes unanimously. Congratulations, gentlemen.
Thank you.
All right. Next, we have public hearing notice. Mr. Collins. Will you read?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Scheduled for the meeting of September 22nd is a county-initiated request to consider an ordinance of the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County amending Title 10 impact fees of the Code of Indian River County to revise Appendix A impact fee rate schedule and amending Code Section 1000.06 imposition to provide an extension temporarily suspending for 6 months the imposition of impact fees for emergency services facilities, correctional facilities, public buildings, development, law enforcement, and solid waste facilities, and providing for codification, severability, and effective date. And you will remember that we already put an ordinance in place suspending these certain fees for a 6-month period with direction to evaluate it at the end of that period as to whether to extend it or not. And this ordinance would provide for an additional 6-month extension of that suspension. Also at this September 22nd meeting, there will be a public hearing on Mark Montgomery's request to abandon a segment of 12th Street Southwest between US 1 and 1st Avenue Southwest, lying east of US 1, and that's a legislative matter. I believe that's all.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Collins. Now it moves us to the departmental matters, community development. Mr. Keating, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Bob Keating. I'm County Community Development Director. This is a request for a local jobs grant from OQQ LLC. And this is actually the first jobs grant request we've gotten in since the board modified the parameters of the jobs grant program back in March. OQQ is a information technology company. They sell software globally, and they're proposing to create 25 jobs. And because they're creating 25 jobs in various income categories, they're eligible for a jobs grant of $131,000. Attached to the staff report is a jobs grant agreement between the county and OQQ, and that identifies the parameters of the jobs grant. The actual $131,000 will be paid out over a 3-year period. and at the end of each 3-year period, the applicant needs to demonstrate that he has created the jobs and is maintaining the jobs. The Economic Development Council considered this application at its meeting last week. Although they didn't have a quorum, they voted unanimously to recommend that the board approve this recommendation. I do want to say that the company owner is here. It's Stuart Woodward, and he, I'm sure, will answer any questions that you may have or may want to make some comments regarding this. I also want to indicate that the funds for this job grant will come from general fund contingency. And actually, on the good news perspective, we have another jobs grant application in here, and that's going to be considered by the Economic Development Council at its meeting this afternoon. I also want to say that we do have representatives from the chamber here. We have Linda Schlitt-Gonzalez and we have Helene Kesseltine, and they may want to speak on this item. But staff recommends that you approve this jobs grant for up to $131,000 and authorize the chairman to execute the agreement that's attached to the staff report.
Okay. Commissioners, any questions?
No, so moved.
Got a motion to approve from Commissioner Wheeler. Is there any comments? I'd just like to, what I'd like to have happen, Bob, if we could, this is with this job grant application being a small firm coming in, exactly what really builds the economic engine for America, not just, and our community. What I'd like to have is an evaluation from these individuals. What can we do? What can we do to make the process a little more easier? What obstructions did you find, if any? I mean, perhaps it did go perfect, but just to have some feedback from the individuals, and I'd like to know how they found out about it also, to perhaps expand on those efforts that they found readily available. And the owners are, I would like to put a face with the name. Okay. Welcome. We won't call you out and make you speak the first day of class, but thank you very much. And I'm looking forward to having you as a part of the community.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Woodward did make a presentation to the EDC, and it's some really sharp technology stuff that he's bringing in here. So one thing, it would be very clean. It's very technology orientated, so it would be pretty exciting stuff. A little of it was over my head, but that's okay. He seemed to know it pretty well, so that's all that really mattered. As far as the process, and maybe Helene can add a little bit more, but I do know the EDC, we held a special call meeting to fast track this, to get the recommendation, to bring it to the commission here as quick as possible. So I think we did move pretty fast once we got word they were looking to do this. We had a special call meeting and got this right here to the agenda.
And that's exactly my point. I mean, if you had to call a special call meeting to make it happen, or to fast track it, perhaps there should be no other way to do it except for fast track it. I mean, that's my whole point, is just to find out, as we had somebody go through this, what can we do to sharpen our pencil and really make this happen. So certainly do appreciate all the efforts. We have a motion on the floor from Commissioner Wheeler, and Commissioner Flesher seconded it, and no further discussion. We'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The motion passes unanimously. Good job. Congratulations. That moves us all the way down to the utility services, and this is the Indian River County Utility Services Advisory Committee recommendation for Indian River County Commission and City Water and Sewer Services.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I don't know if it would be appropriate, but I think your item under your items would be appropriate to be discussed here also, because I think it ties in with the resolution they're asking for.
All right. Thank you. I'll be more than happy to discuss that now.
Can we do that first?
Yeah. Mr. Olson, would you like to give us a little bit of background on that?
For the record, Eric Olson, Director of Utilities. What we have here is two resolutions that came about in 1987 between the City of Vero Beach and Indian River County, wherein they delineated extended service franchise to the City of Vero Beach for service to the South Barrier Islands. In that process, it recognized that this did expire in 2017, and in doing so, there is a 5-year provision that basically states in there that either party must notify the other party in the process of what their intent is to continue it in 2012, or whether to go ahead and terminate the agreement. In this particular case, the Utility Advisory Committee, there was a presentation by Dr. Faraday, who's here today, who requested that the Utility Advisory Committee submit a recommendation to the board that prior to the 2012 date, and effectively now, notify, giving the City of Vero Beach pre-notice that our intention is not to renew this agreement. Currently, right now, and we've discussed this at one of the earlier meetings, is that utility staff is currently going through the process of reviewing all the infrastructure requirements. We have met with the City of Vero Beach staff. We'll be continuing to meet with them. We're looking at all the infrastructure needs, the costs that go along with that. More importantly, we're taking a look at this in terms of the bills that would be seen by Mr. and Mrs. Smith and the Barrier Islands, and our intent is to be in a position to be able to demonstrate that those would perhaps be less if, in fact, the county served that. So what's on the table right this minute is the Utility Advisory Committee's recommendation to submit a notification to the City of Vero Beach that our intent is to not renew. Coupling it to other discussions, there has been perhaps the chairman has recommended that perhaps we develop a meeting between the City of Vero Beach, Indian River Shores, and Indian River County, the councils and commission staff, to sit down and kind of discuss the items, pro and con. And again, prior to that point in time, Indian River County staff will have submitted and given to you for review information that will give you some indication of all the costs. We'll look at it in terms of the impacts. I will say this, that we're pretty far along the process on that, so I would feel comfortable if, in fact, the commission were to seek a joint meeting in October. We will be in a position to be able to give our own commission a little bit of a preview in terms of what these costs and the opportunities would be. The one thing that I would clarify, as I did last time, is that if, in fact, the decision is made to serve either the South Barrier Island by Indian River County or the town of Indian River Shores, the individual bill would be received. It would be an Indian River County bill. It would not process itself through the City of Vero Beach. It would strictly be an Indian River County bill. Our position is, and this is part of our analysis, is our rates have been in place for 10 years. We don't see any change in those rates. We don't see any prospective changes in those rates. We're taking a look at those. We're always open-minded. We want to be in a position to take a look at that. We want to present to the commission at the time that not only are our rates fairly stable, we have a very solid financial program. Credit to the majority of this obviously goes to Joe Baird, the county administrator, and Jason Brown. But our system is such that we feel very confident that looking into the future, we have a very stable, sound system, predictive financial arrangement. And so that's what we would bring back to the table if, in fact, the commission elects to develop a tri-party meeting with the town of Indian River Shores and the City of Vero Beach on this.
Okay. All right. Commissioners, yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman. Yes, and Mr. Olson, during his presentation, alluded to the fact of this meeting to take place. And I understand that we have a workshop scheduled.
We haven't got it scheduled. We've agreed to it. Yes, sir.
An agreement to a workshop, right. Which would probably put us in a predicament where we can openly discuss but not vote upon. And as one member of the Utility Advisory Committee, I appreciate this being brought forward, but to discuss this any further at this point and to vote on it may be errant, as this would not work on the same lines as the workshop or an agreed discussion. And I believe that your emergency item most certainly would complete this process and allow us the opportunity to vote.
That's a very good point, and I appreciate that. I think for us to have the opportunity to change the workshop from a workshop to a meeting will give us, very similar to what we've done with the Piper, whenever we had the opportunity to sit down, look eye to eye, and say, okay, do you have an interest in consolidating? And it's either going to be a yes or no. And if the answer is no, then we know what we need to do. If the answer is yes, then we have questions we need to have answered. The recommendation from the advisory committee is extremely important, and I think that perhaps that day would be the time for us to, when we have this joint meeting, for us to either vote on this or present this to the cities of Indian River Shores as well as the city of Vero Beach. And if we, based on the response that we get from the other municipalities at that time, that's whenever we, I think, should go ahead and address this proclamation. It's not a matter of trying to put anything off. It's a matter of, I don't want to poison the well before we get there until our mind's made up. Okay. Because clearly, if they say no to any consolidation, then we just need to look into being able to serve those residents that are outside the city limits.
Now, as part of that workshop, our commitment as staff to you in preparation of this will be to formulate sort of an economic analysis of what all this would take place. We're going to again take a look at our capacity. In that presentation, we'll be in a position to be able to show what our capacity is to be able to serve them. We'll also be in a position to be able to show the financial impact. And so we'll have all those details as part of that, so the decision can be made up front. Everybody can see it. Is this a good thing or a bad thing, whichever the case may be like that.
Okay.
And again,
go ahead.
That was mentioned again. You've just mentioned workshop again. I know that we need to carve out a meeting. The very fact that we have several municipalities that are affected parties, and I think that we need to move forward for an agreement for a voting populace.
Okay. Commissioner Solari.
A couple items. One is, this is a pretty complicated matter. And for that reason, I'd like to once again reiterate the invitation to have our utility department go before the City of Vero Beach City Council prior to the meeting. It gives a lot of information. It allows them to get a body of information prior to the meeting so that they can start thinking about it and discussing it with their staff and get better information. I know, based on all the information that's out there, and the stack of just City of Vero Beach Studies and Consultants report is about 2 inches thick, that I would certainly like the opportunity to discuss it openly with my fellow commission members prior to a meeting with other groups. So,
from the city side or from our side?
Well, I would like the utilities department to make it to the city side. We've had the presentation at the county. And we've had a lot of benefit from discussions with our utilities department. I believe prior to our meeting with the City of Vero Beach, the City of Vero Beach City Council ought to have the same opportunity.
I understand.
So I'd like to just one more time extend the invitation to them and maybe have a letter go out under your name to that effect.
We'll draft that. And we, of course, we can't force the city.
No, I don't mean to force. I just want to make sure that they understand that that's open and try to make this whole process as open and transparent as possible.
Absolutely.
The second item is that I've often talked at a number of meetings with other groups, asking them to participate more in the system. I've said that, it's good if you actually vote for your representatives, but that's not really enough. You need to actually, if you can, do some work on different issues. I have at times suggested that you take an issue that interests you and work on it and help develop it. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Faherty and Glenn Horan, who have taken various utility issues. I'm not saying even whether I agree or disagree with them. Both gentlemen have spent a tremendous amount of time trying to develop the issues in a very positive manner. It's very clear that they've helped bring a better understanding of these issues to many of our citizens. And I think that that is our democracy working at its best. I'll note that Dr. Faherty is a member of our Utilities Advisory Committee. Just having this resolution before us today is showing that Dr. Faherty is working within the system to help try to improve the system, and I think that is extremely healthy for our democracy, and I'd like to publicly thank him for his efforts today.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner O'Brien?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with where we're going on this, and just to clarify what you said earlier, I've received a lot of letters and emails from a lot of the South Barrier Island residents, and again, I don't think we're putting this off. Yeah. I think we do need to have the costs and the repercussions to make prudent decisions. But we're not ignoring all those folks that sent the letters. We're well aware of their situation, and we will address it, I think, in a more prudent manner. Mr. Chairman, as you can't make a motion with your permission, I'll go ahead and make a motion that we hold a joint meeting with the county, the city of Vero Beach, and Indian River Shores.
Second.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Got a motion from Commissioner O'Brien that we in fact hold a joint meeting, not workshop, but meeting with the city of Vero Beach and Indian River Shores regarding this utility issue. And of course, at that time, I wholeheartedly expect the resolution to come up, some information on it. And in that, Commissioner, if you'd like, I'll just go ahead and write the letter if the Commissioner's comfortable with what Commissioner Solari had said, and then we'll go from there.
And then I guess just understand we'll also just postpone any action on the advisory committee resolution until we hold that joint meeting.
Either that or we can consider it at the joint meeting.
Oh, okay. No,
Because I don't want this as, if anything, I feel like this is accelerating things as far as taking the next step forward. Having a workshop would be postponing things because all we could do is discuss. You would not be able to take action and vote. And at the workshop, or excuse me, at the meeting, we'll in fact be able to get a vote, yes or no, and then according to how the vote goes, will be the direction that we as a county take. Dr. Faraday or anybody have any questions on this before we vote? Questions or comments?
Thank you very much. We certainly do appreciate the leadership role that you're taking. And this is absolutely incredible. I think 3 months ago, we would not have expected where we are right now. I think it's extremely important. What we want on the South Beach area, and I'm representing the 2,595 properties in the South Beach area, is to know that at the end of 2017, as Eric has said, we'll receive a bill from the county and report to our elected officials. But one critical thing that I think is very important is that with the email list and the notifications and meetings that we're having, is we are contacted by numerous real estate brokers and salespersons who are telling us that people interested in leasing or buying property in Indian River County are first asking who provides the utilities. If the answer is the city is providing any of the utilities, electricity, water, sewer, or irrigation, they generally ask to see other properties. So this is affecting each of your districts for the 22,000 electric customers and the 4,300 sewer, water, and irrigation customers. So this is really an economic issue we're talking about right now, and for the future. We'll be taking separate actions with regard to the electricity very shortly. Sure. Thank you very much.
Well, and based upon what you say, I think really has this commission, not just the economic side of it, but not being able to give those people that are being served with the water, sewer, and irrigation, any answer. And I don't want to be in that situation no more than the residents want to be in that situation. Mr. Johnson, welcome.
Bob Johnson, Corwin. At what point do the rest of the county folks get involved in participating in, because you're not having a workshop, you're going right to a meeting, which enables you to have a vote. It seems like that the other than the folks that are impacted that are county residents have a say, but how about the residents of the other than that, those folks? When do we have a say that live in other parts of the county? When do we have a participatory part in this? If we were bypassing a workshop, what does that mean for the rest of us?
Bob, I try to run as open meeting as possible and give everybody that wants to speak the opportunity to, as long as they do it in a civil fashion, and that will not be any different than the joint meeting. It will be my intent to be able to conduct that kind of meeting also.
I would change try to do. You do run an open meeting.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, Commissioner. That's
so at the meeting being proposed, whenever that is.
Yes.
That's when the rest of the county residents will have a say on what the impact is, so forth.
That's correct, and hopefully what we're working on with that date will be the utilities. Mr. Olson will have information for us on that, and what I'm trying to do right now, and just to let the commissioners know, I'm going to try to have it televised, and I'm going to try to have it so that we did very similar to the Piper meeting where we all got to sit down and look eye to eye, not have one council on a dais like this. So that pretty much is going to limit us to where we can go, but that is my goal, Bob, for those that even can't make it to the meeting, is to have it televised, to do this as openly as possible. Is there any other comments or questions? Anybody else from the public wish to address this issue? Seeing none, all those in favor of supporting the change from the workshop to to actually meeting between the three municipalities signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. I anticipate this being sometime in October, sometime, and that way we'll be able to move forward here probably within the next 2 weeks to 30 days. Okay? Thank you. Commissioner Fletcher, I appreciate you helping me move that up to my matters from my matters to this item.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay, next we have the county attorney's matters.
Thank you, Mr.
Collins.
Chairman. Last month, Commissioner Solari posed some thoughts to initiate a discussion about the search for a new county attorney, and I tried to take the bullets that he had identified as what he considered important and respond to each of them. So I've written you all a memo that basically addresses the job description. The first one comes from the county ordinance, which really sets out the role of the county attorney, followed by a job description which was used in the last hire, and also tried to set out some of the general tasks of the county attorney and some of the more important specific tasks that the county attorney carries out, as well as specific tasks that the office itself performs. There was also an inquiry as to where there were time-intensive areas occupying a lot of the legal staff in the past 3 years and what was anticipated in the next 3 years. Also, discussion of a contract, and I've given you some of my thoughts on contract issues. I've also set out what I consider the strengths and weaknesses of the current legal team and areas that the new attorney should have within his competency, but I think primarily it comes down to a comfort level with both the board, the staff, and the office itself. I know in some years past we had people in this position that were not particularly trustful or morale suffered when there wasn't a good comfort communication between all levels of county government. And I think you need to make sure that whoever you hire, you're all comfortable with, and you don't have any ambivalence about the personality and whether there's any mean-spiritedness there. I think it's got to be a person open to give and take with both the commission, the departments, and its staff as well. There was also an inquiry as to whether a search firm should be hired, and it's my feeling that it really isn't necessary in today's day and age. Mainly because in the electronic age we have the Florida Station County Attorney listserv, which every county attorney and assistant county attorney can get instantaneous communication through that. There's also an International Municipal Lawyers Association listserv that contacts a lot of the municipal attorneys, which and that listserv has a large contingent from Florida. And I think between getting the word out quickly through those mediums, an ad in the Florida Bar News and in the local newspaper, you should get a fairly good group of candidates without having to go to what would typically be a national search firm. And also, you're going to have someone licensed in the state of Florida, so you're going to be geographically limited to some extent in where you look. Though I didn't read my memo, I thought that was something that you could do, and I really did it as a framework for you to be thinking about as you interview or as you look for persons, how you want to fill it in. I didn't really want to expand beyond that point, but if you had questions, I'd address them.
I appreciate you doing the work as far as pulling this forward for us. Commissioners, do you have any questions or comments? Or yes, Commissioner Slur.
First, before I was wondering if we could have Mr. Sexton weigh in on his side of it.
Jim?
Good morning. Human Resources Director Jim Sexton. I agree with Will. We certainly can do a search inside for you that would equal any outside firm. Typically, if you use an outside firm, I called the biggie, if you will, that's used throughout Florida. And he gave me a quote of $21,500 to do a search for the county attorney position. And I firmly believe that the current human resources staff can run a process for you that we can all get on board and agree to. I'm prepared today to discuss a full process of how you want to do it, or we can prepare that and bring that back at another meeting. I did meet with Commissioner Solari about that. I've put together some, like a posting that we could use, took some of the information from Will's memo, looked at the last posting from the previous hire, kind of combined some stuff that I see that's out there, talked to a couple of department heads of what do they use the county attorney staff for. So I made sure I included that in the posting process. But like I said, I'm ready to talk about it today, or we can bring it back at September 22nd meeting, or whenever you guys would like.
I appreciate the approach, and I'm kind of torn between, do we have staff bring forward a recommendation whenever this is somebody that answers directly to the commission, or do y'all want to get together and craft our own, like he's talking? I see good and bad of each. I don't know exactly which way would be the best way to go. And for discussion, do y'all have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think there are two things. One is whether we're going to go to a consultant or in-house.
I know which way I'd rather go on that.
And so do I now, but I have to talk with Mr. Sexton, and that would be in-house. But I don't think that I'd want the Human Resource Department to bring us one choice. I think I'd probably want them to bring us a number of choices that we can look at. And
for an attorney?
For the attorney.
Oh, I wouldn't go that far, as much as I think the HR department should, in my opinion, bring forth criteria, parameters, and then it should be this board's decision out of the entire pool, which would make the short list. If I think there's a function for our HR department to perform here for us, it would be these are the qualities that Mr. Collins had, and of course, and other past attorneys had, and as far as, you know, obviously licensed in Florida. I mean, some of those are no-brainers. Bring those forward, and then that will give us the parameters for us to move forward with, and be able to find the person that we feel most comfortable with, to lead the county attorney's department. I think that's where I'd like to go.
Well, most certainly, and Mr. Sexton, I just want to say that $21,000 is most certainly a high cost to pay for a job search when we have all these avenues available to us. I wouldn't support $21,000 or $21 to do a job search at this point. I believe that we saw what happened with our demand star, that all we need to do is put a small little ad, and suddenly the floodgates are open. And in addition, looking at the criteria that Mr. Collins has set forth about having worked in the state of Florida as an attorney, and the rest of the criteria, I believe that we'll be able to find a suitable candidate post haste. And I'd like to direct staff to go forward and establish that search pattern in-house.
Okay, that's a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Got a second?
Yeah, just
Commissioner Brown?
what Mr. Sexton has ready to go out, I think I'd like to see that come back next week, and we can then talk over those points and, you know, the terms of the contract and things like that. I think we need to all work out before we send this out and start interviewing people. I think we should be unified on what's going to be in that contract, or if there is a contract.
That was the intention.
Whoa, one at a time. Commissioner Brown, were you done?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I like to second that. I mean, before anything goes out, I think that we also need to have some discussion on the contract itself, because in the past there seems to be some problems with some provisions, and I believe we ought to have an opportunity to discuss what provisions we have problems with prior to going out. I don't want to engage in discussions with some attorneys and suggest that we might hire them and then find out because of provision C, you know, we're not even in the same game.
Right.
I think that's a very good idea, because when the hire was made in 2000, there were a number of attorneys on the list, and there was actually a selection of the most preferred candidate, but it broke down on contract terms. And I think it's best if both parties know going in, this is what the job entails, this is how far we'll go, how far we won't, so that you don't end up with your second, third, or fourth choice just because you weren't clear going in what the job involved.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Commissioner Wheeler.
Yeah, well, probably, I agree with Commissioner O'Brien. I think they should bring this back. We should discuss it at the next meeting. We have some backup on this. But also, I mentioned before, and I'll mention again, that one of the questions in the application of the questionnaire should be, would you work without a contract? You know, what we do is, because certain individuals, like the county administrator and the county attorney, work at, quote, the pleasure of the commission, and they don't have property rights. Generally, the contract gives them much more property rights financially than any employee working for the county. And I know when we hired Mr. Chandler, he came to work here without a contract. And in today's economy, I think there's probably people out there that would be willing to come to work without a contract. But I do think at least that question should be asked, and you can weigh the qualifications of the attorneys based on, let's say, 5 say they would, 5 say they wouldn't. You could still weigh the other qualifications. But I'm not in favor of contracts. You either work at the pleasure of the commissioner or you don't.
Commissioner Fletcher.
And if for the passes any indication, I am also not in favor of individual contracts for these two positions. And with that in mind, I'd be happy to discuss that when staff brings that back to us. We can also include that.
Okay. All right. We have a motion. If somebody could help me remember it.
How about the maker?
It was to do an in-house search and I believe have Mr. Sexton report back on some kind of process next week.
Okay. That motion, I believe, was made by Commissioner Wheeler and seconded by Fletcher.
Commissioner Fletcher.
And seconded by Commissioner Wheeler. Any further discussion?
Just to clarify, I guess we're not going to do the search until we viewed all the parameters. Is that
right?
That is correct.
There was no direction to do the search.
Yeah. Okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. Sexton. Mr. DeBrawl, welcome.
Thank you.
On the next matter, Commissioners, Bill DeBrawl, Deputy County Attorney. For Commission approval today, we have the stipulation for three landowners here, Bethel, Brown, and Stanbridge. They're located on 66th Avenue to the north of 45th and 49th Streets. There's a total of 7.9 acres, including a pond site that will be involved in this stipulated order of take. So you recall the Commission authorized staff to file suit. Suit has been filed against the three property owners in a single suit. The outside counsel of Policastro and LaRue has been negotiating with the attorney for the three property owners and have arrived at this stipulation. What will happen is that at a conference tomorrow, a status conference before Judge Canarak tomorrow, will present the stipulations to the court for approval. They are essentially as it appears in your backup, although there is one additional item that has been added that differs between the Bethel and Stanbridge versus Charlene Brown. If you recall, Ms. Brown has a TIF or Murphy reservation on her property. She would ask that the Commission continue to, as it has in the past, give full value to that Murphy reservation and essentially ignore it, carrying on through the purpose of trial. As I said, there's approximately 7.9 acres, inclusive of the pond site. The total deposit that the county will be making is $818,700. There is a lease to the Stanbridges. As you can see on the monitor here, the yellow right-of-way line will be impacting both of their residences there. The lease provides that they be able to stay in the residence rent-free for a period of 1 year, renewable 6 months at a time, so long as the road is not ready to be built. There is also provision that the Stanbridges would be able to relocate those residences as they see fit. As I stated, we have some time before Judge Canarak tomorrow for a status conference on this matter. It's our intention that we go ahead and bring these stipulations forward, have them approved by the court. We would then go ahead and deposit the total of $818,700 into the registry of the court within 20 days of the court's order. Upon removal of the money from the registry of the court, the property would pass to the possession of the county, and we would proceed with then only arguing about the fair value of the property or the value of the property. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to address them.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Yeah, when you talk about a 1 year lease renewable, it's 6 months interval, is that the same lease, just a rollover? or would at some point in time you charge rent until the road is done?
I believe at the county's, or at the commission's direction, at the end of the 5-year period, we would reassess the lease.
So it would be a 1-year lease, renewable every 6 months with no rent?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions, Commissioners? Okay. The only comment, Bill, and I had mentioned this to you earlier, in light of this being an eminent domain process, it's a very uncomfortable process for me as a commissioner to do, and in order to help facilitate this and to placate things, I understand we have about 20 days that we can deposit those funds into the registry.
Yes, it's our intention if the order is entered and we see no reason why the order wouldn't be entered, we'd immediately go ahead and start the process for the deposit of the money into the registry of the court as soon as possible.
The significance of this, Commissioners, is it gives these individuals access to that money while the court case is going on. And so, Mr. Baird, Mr. Collins, upon the stipulation taking place, if we could deposit those funds into the registry as soon as we can possibly cut a check. Mr. Baird? Commissioner, you okay with that?
It's just a matter of presenting the order of take to finance, having them cut the check, and taking it back over to the courthouse.
I just let them have their money as soon as possible is the way I feel about this.
Traditionally, I have walked the check over myself.
Okay. All right, Commissioners, any other questions or comments? Okay. In that case, what's your pleasure?
Move staff recommendation.
Second. Got a motion to approve staff recommendation from Commissioner O'Brien with Commissioner Fletcher seconding. Any further comments? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. DeBraw.
You're welcome.
That moves us to the Commissioner's Matters. Commissioner Wheeler.
Yes. This simply is a commitment we made when this came up with after Mr. Baird was arrested for a driving under the influence charge. And there was quite a crowd here that wanted to speak, and the case was up in the air, no decision, determination had been made, and we didn't allow people to go into great detail or any detail other than try to keep them on the subject of policy. So I've asked that this come back first because I said at that meeting that I would bring it back regardless of the outcome, and secondly, to evaluate our policy. So, and that's why it's here, and it's the sole reason for it being here.
I don't mean to have Commissioner Solari overshadow your issue. They seem very similar, maybe?
Yeah, they are, and I think Mr. Solari's...
Okay.
Commissioner Wheeler.
Sure. Commissioner, are you okay with kind of sharing the floor with Commissioner Solari on this?
Do you have to know today?
Well, yeah.
That's fine with me.
Thank you. Appreciate your indulgence. Commissioner Solari, along the same lines, his is to give people to talk about it. Was yours a little more
I wanted to just have the commission discuss a little bit more as a matter of policy where we're going to go forward. It's ambiguous. There's a lot of public concern about it, and the genesis of it is the same as Commissioner Wheeler's, to have this come out to the public and let anybody have a chance to discuss it and let us have a chance to discuss it ourselves. And actually, given that we're about to commence a search for a new county attorney, to see if we're going to end up with a policy which we might want to make as part of, I'll call it, instead of the contract, the terms of employment. And whether going forward, we want to make whatever these terms of employment part of both the county attorney's and county administrator's contract.
Okay. All right. I guess open this up to the public.
I think that's probably a good start.
However you want to run it.
Anybody wish to speak on this issue?
I wonder if, does staff have any comments that, I don't,
Yeah,
Okay.
Okay.
I have a couple of comments. If the goal is to have a uniform policy, you have to keep in mind that you're dealing with several sets of employees. You've got some who are non-contract employees, you've got some who are, you've got bargaining unit employees, you've got the interplay of the Florida drug-free workplace issues that have to be incorporated into the policies both for the non-union and the union employees. So even if you're looking for some kind of a one-size-fits-all policy, there may be wrinkles because of the different situations that a union as opposed to a non-union employee finds them in with respect to bargaining rights and the requirements of the Florida Drug-Free Workplace Act, just as a background.
And I think really the only thing that we can discuss here today, or really the only thing that would be fruitful to discuss perhaps, would be those outside of the bargaining units. I mean, we can't change that language unless it's at impasse before us to force the legislative contract. So, I mean, that decision's taken care of. So if I'm understanding you correctly, then the proper thing for us to look at would be our non-union employees and I guess you could say our contract to individuals. Is that a safe assumption?
And you may also want to look at your administrative policy manuals with respect to the circumstances or conditions under which you can suspend or terminate. I don't have the answer right now, but I think those are the areas you want to look at.
Mr. Baker?
I think staff did that, and basically what they're concerned about is my position, and it is not addressed, my position, the county attorneys, and I think what Commissioner Solari came up with, staff has reviewed it for our positions. I'm totally comfortable with that as a policy, and it matches, it's very similar to other, and I think Jim Sex can speak on it. I think it's very similar to other policies we have, and I think that's the only one that isn't covered. And so that's what Commissioner Solari has, gives us a policy for the county administrator and the county attorney's office.
Mr. Sexton?
Joe basically said it. What we worked with Commissioner Solari was basically to put together a draft policy that would apply to county officers, which our ordinance defines county officers as the county attorney and the county administrator. If you wanted to expand it to all contract employees, I guess you could do county officers and contract employees that this would apply to. I think there's an interesting wrinkle in it, and is if there's no reference to it in that contract, does it still apply? That's more of a legal question, but we can certainly put a policy in that basically mirrors what we do with non-union and union employees. And that's basically what was in the backup today under Commissioner Solari's items, which is in the event of an arrest, what do we do? And it basically gives you three options under union contracts and non-union employees. Basically, we have four options. In the policy that's in the backup today, it eliminates one of those options because the option that we eliminated was reassigned to other duties. And I don't think it's the pleasure of the board that if your county attorney or your county administrator is in trouble that you would assign them to other duties. That is something we do consider when other employees are arrested. We consider as one of the four options of whether we should reassign that employee or take one of the other actions.
Well, I had two purposes on this language, and one was to try to make sure that our county administrator and county attorney were held to the highest standard, and there's some debate during the whole process of whether some employees were held to a higher standard than the county attorney and county administrator. And also there seemed to be very little direction for the Board of County Commissioners. No framework within to work if something came up. So and that's basically what I wanted to discuss with my fellow commissioners today, to see if they felt more or less the same way, or wanted to do something, or wanted to do nothing.
Commissioner Wheeler, you got anything you want to add to that?
No, if you, I would agree with Commissioner Solari. I'd like to see as much as possible everybody held to the same standards. I think consistency is important, and there are some problems with that, as was mentioned by Mr. Collins, because of the diversity of the workforce we have in the county. But as much as possible, I'd like to see the standards be consistent.
Mr. Sexton, does the policy that you brought forward, or the policy that we had, create the standard discrepancy?
The language that we used in that proposed policy that's in the backup is basically copy and pasted right out of the union agreements, except that we eliminated one of the options, which was the reassign option. But other than that, it's the exact language right out of the union contracts.
Okay. Commissioner
Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree. I believe in fair and equitable treatment across the board, no matter what position of the rank, file, or administration that one may hold. I just wanted to point out on the drug-free workplace policy, section 7.0. I believe that you cited per Florida State Statute, Chapter 440. Item number O was a safety-sensitive position. Believe that we have always had the opportunity to be able to address this issue based on the fact that anyone in the upper end of the administration, namely the chief administrator or the county attorney, work with confidential information that will be included in the statute. So we already had an avenue to address if needed and warranted. However, this plan most certainly incorporates or represents fair and equitable treatment.
And that was part of the problem. As I read all the backup that we got from the Human Resources, it was not clear to me whether the county attorney or county administrator were actually in safety-sensitive positions. There was some ambiguity in that to me. So
Well, anything that we adopt here today is not going to answer that question, is it?
No, but you don't need it with this in place.
Okay. All right. Mr. Zito.
Thank you, Michael Zito, Assistant County Administrator. Commissioner Fleischer, your reference to the language in 7.0 with respect to confidential information does pertain to criminal investigations, so that would not apply. In terms of safety-sensitive position, that is defined by the Florida statutes as any position in which a momentary lapse in attention could result in immediate threat of injury or death to the public. That's a tough fit. Let me just back up a moment and remind the Commission that it has absolute discretion and authority over these two positions. So in effect, they are held to the highest standard because they have no opportunity for the due process afforded to the other employees in a determination of a for-cause event that would trigger disciplinary action. So not unlike a judge in a criminal context, he's given a set of guidelines by the legislature in which he can consider a range of punishment that is within those guidelines. However, there's always an opportunity for aggravating and mitigating circumstances to sentence, if you will, outside of the range. So in this context, start out with the notion that you have absolute discretion and authority on any given Tuesday, whether there's cause or not, to sever or discipline in any way you see fit these two officers. In an effort to provide some guidance in that endeavor, we've drafted a policy that the board could adopt, which would give it some memorialized guidelines in which they could apply in the situation of an arrest. That is exactly what's in the union contracts, with the exception of the reassignment.
Okay. With that said, I'm going to make a motion to adopt as policy, the backup material going forward for our county administrator and county.
Second.
We've got a motion to adopt that as policy from the county for the county administrator and county attorney. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Mr. Chairman, and just a point of clarification, Mr. Zito, it's a moot point. However, where it states in that statute, work with confidential information or documents pertaining to criminal investigations, there clearly is a separation of sensitive information, confidential information, and investigative information in what it appears here before the statute. But I believe it's a moot point.
Okay. Well taken. Thank you.
Mr. Collins.
Is the policy that's going to be considered by this motion on page 250 of the backup?
Yes.
Okay. I have two observations. Number two, they're placing the employee on leave without pay until such time as any charges are disposed of. It doesn't really address the situation if the employee is cleared or is pay reinstated. And I think that may be an issue. And the final paragraph says that the officer may be terminated from employment. I think you should probably have a clause without severance pay if that's the intent, to that an arrest be for cause grounds. Right now the contracts are set up so that you can fire without cause. You don't have to have reasons. But if you want to include a provision, whether by policy or contract, that an arrest is grounds for termination, you should probably say without a normal severance package or something.
I don't know how we can have our county policy supersede a written contract that's already in place.
That's why I said going forward. I mean, if we want to add that in future contracts, fine, but I don't want to open existing contracts at this time. My basic point on this is to send a message to basically everybody involved and give guidance to the commission. We were left sort of in limbo when this occurred. And so was the county administrator. I mean, is he a safety sensitive? Or what standard is applied to him? We didn't know. I just wanted to make sure that after today, the highest standard is applied. I don't want to renegotiate contracts at this time. I'm happy going forward to make this a part of any terms of employment for either of those two positions. But right now, I just want to make sure that everybody's on the same page as to what would be acceptable or how they will be treated should such an event recur.
Well, I still think number 2 is a little open-ended. If an employee's on leave without pay,
and I think that
is cleared, should they have their pay reinstated?
And I think that, I think we can leave that ambiguous given the 2 employees we're talking about and let the situation at that time dictate that. And I'm happy to.
And case law will play into that too, so you could analyze it on a case-by-case basis at that time.
Okay. We have a motion and a second, and anything anybody needs to ask Commissioner O'Brien?
Under discussion, under the current contract, there is Section 3 that is titled Ethics, and it does state that the administrator shall abide by and perform all assigned duties in accordance with county laws, regulations, and ordinances regulating ethics. So I think if we put this in policy as ethics policy, then the contract does require them to abide by this. So we don't have to change the contract. The contract by reference to the county regulations, I think, incorporates that.
Mr. Collins, would you agree with that?
I think that's changing. It may be adopting a new policy or a new regulation after the contract may change the terms of the contract, but it's something that could be agreed to by the 2 contract employees.
But so, because I think that really our ethics policy, we could change that any way we want to, and it would start affecting the contract of the 2.
I guess the point is, if you change the regulations such that the fundamental terms of employment are changed, then you're probably going a little too far. But Mr. O'Brien is right that the contract now requires abiding by the regulations. Presumably those in effect at the time the contract was signed, if there are new regulations imposed, that might be a matter of negotiation. I mean, we're not in a collective bargaining situation, but it certainly would come into play with a union contract.
We're trying to do this moving forward. I think that's the whole thing.
Okay. All right. We have a motion on the floor to basically adopt the policy that we have right out of the union contract.
Mr. Chairman, that include Will's suggested wording at the very end where it says maybe terminate from employment without severance or compensation?
No, it does not.
I wouldn't go that far because keep in mind this is going to be a countywide policy.
Well, it only refers to the county officers. So.
Okay.
Well, contract's going to supersede.
I don't know how. I almost feel like, Mr. Collins, that would be that part of going too far that you're talking about that would change the terms of employment. Yes or no? Could be.
Well, I'm certainly not going to negotiate against myself.
What's your, Ms. Renzi, please come up anytime you'd like. Mr. Sexton, what's your take on that?
My opinion would be that the current contract language would supersede any policy that you put in effect today.
That's kind of the way I feel about it. Okay.
Well, with that said, then I think we should still have it in there. So, because in 6 months from now, we may or may not have a new contract with an attorney. Mm-hmm. So I think we should put it in here now, understanding that it may not be applicable to the current contract, but I think we should have it in there going forward then.
Okay, I'm happy to amend my motion to that effect.
Okay.
Yes, Commissioner Ridley.
This says to place the employee on leave without pay until such time as any changes are disposed of by trial, acquittal, dismissal, conviction, or other judicial action. Maybe that's not clear to me, but I mean, this might go on for a year.
Well, you have choices. You can pick either one, any of these 3 options. So you don't. That's what your options are. You can pick any of the options.
But you're still looking at suspending someone for a lengthy period of time. And I think that there are certain jobs that can be affected by these conditions, and then there's jobs that aren't affected as much by them. I don't know. We'll see what the public has to say. Let me think about this.
Ms. Renzi, welcome.
Thank you very much. Renee Renzi of Waverly Place, Vero Beach. Without knowing or understanding or being able to hear all the fine points you've been discussing this last several minutes, I think the important thing for you to keep in mind is that whatever you come up with, that in the future, all violations such as occurred this year are treated exactly the same, so that a lifeguard and a county administrator are not treated differently. I think the public needs to know that. For the sake of your public relations and your future elections, I think that's the utmost thing you should keep in mind. Everyone should be treated the same for the same violation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Renzi. Anybody else wish to speak? We have a motion on the floor, but did we add Commissioner?
Doris is coming up.
Oh, yes, ma'am. Please come forward.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Young lady. Thank you for allowing me to speak on this very sensitive and important matter. First, I would like to say that under the circumstances where it was the defense of Mr. Baird was focused so much, both by himself and his lawyer and in the media, on his vertigo, that I'm very concerned for the liability of our county as to him or anyone with such an awful affliction to be driving public vehicles, and what our liability would be in the case of an injury or death, and also even if that person was driven, chauffeur driven or whatever, making decisions with such a terrible affliction. That is a terrible affliction, as my husband has been afflicted with that. He does not drive. I do all the driving. And so that is a deep concern for me for the liability of our county, to say nothing of the safety. I would like to say a little offside on the personal side of this. As my husband and I buried our daughter from an impaired driver, I can tell you it would not make any difference as we were picking out the casket and making her funeral arrangements and then taking care of her severely injured baby for the rest of his life. It would not have made any difference if they would have come and said, oh, but the driver had vertigo. The person is still dead. The sadness is there. The grief is still there. So that is something that I would like. This is going to be a very difficult position, but like the last lady said, I hope that it is for everybody, that it goes for everybody. And the decision is going to be difficult, but I would like to also to have not only, there are many forms of impairment, and that's about it. And I think when I came up, I forgot to give my name, Doris Trove, 1236 30th Avenue. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yes, sir.
My name is Joe Wiggins, and I've been kind of involved in some of these incidences myself. Matter of fact, I had to stop my dad from driving because of a problem he had, which wasn't vertigo, but it was just the temperamental mind that he had for us going into the traffic. I also had the incident of being stopped coming home for a DUI, which I wasn't. And my point is the officer don't feel like they can do their job if they stop someone and they let off on technicalities, and you over the alcohol limit for his drinking. We getting different scenarios. Was some people they're severely punished, and some people seem to be above the law, which I don't feel like that should happen. As they said earlier, everybody should be treated equal. If you get treated stopped for DUI, you over the limit, you should pay the penalty. If you're going to be able to escape on technicality, then what are the law enforcement officers supposed to do? I mean, I could say anything, which I do have problems for as walking or balance or whatever. But if I've had 3 or 4 drinks, that's gonna make me so I shouldn't even be driving, period. And just as the lady said earlier, you can't go on those kind of technicalities, because if a person is that severe, they shouldn't be under the wheel. They should stop driving, just as I did my dad.
Thank you, Mr. Wiggins. Anybody else wish to speak? Okay, we have a motion on the floor, and I'm not sure exactly where that, Commissioner O'Brien, where yours wound up.
I think Commissioner Slurry agreed to add the without severance or compensation to the end of the last paragraph there.
No, I don't think you did.
No, I did for given that it would not apply to contracts that we currently have, I'm fine with that language going forward.
Okay. Any other questions or comments, Commissioners? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
And the second item I had under there is the idea of mock DUIs. We presently have 2 mock DUIs. One goes to each one of our high schools. And it seemed to me that if mock DUIs were good for high school, it might not be a bad idea for the public itself. I find myself, when there are things that I probably ought not to be doing, to be reminded of the reasonings from time to time. And I think a mock DUI gives a good articulation of why you ought not combine driving and drinking. So I was also would like, if we do go forward with the public mock DUI, to try to couple it with some other public event. The idea is that maybe if we coupled it with some other public event that was going on, say at Riverside Park, that the mock DUI might help build that event's attendance, and that event's attendance might also help build the mock DUI's attendance.
Well, Commissioner, I understand what you're saying, but what you're talking about doing there is almost combining a funeral with a wedding.
Not really.
Well, I've seen them, and they're very somber events, and it's not like, I understand what you're saying. Mm-hmm. I clearly do. And I think that I don't know, I'm looking at it, whenever you walk away from that thing, you're walking away saying, wow.
Okay, and then maybe just make it by itself. But again, I think it's a good idea, and actually the idea of talking to St. Ed's about it was simply, I was discussing this with a St. Ed's graduate, and he just said, well, why don't you have it at St. Ed's too? And I don't know if it's appropriate to have it at a private school or if they want one, but it's the type of thing that I just wanted to make available to them if we could.
Well, I think that Students Against SAD does this, if I'm through the division of MAD. So it's not like, I don't think that, I mean, as far as the funding goes and all that, I don't know exactly what we provide in that, except for perhaps some law enforcement education of some kind. But I understand what you're saying. But as far as requiring it,
I'm not requiring it. I'm just saying to engage St. Ed's in the discussion to see if it's something they want to do, and maybe even the students from Sebastian and Vero Beach could engage the students in St. Ed's and the members of SAD and say, this is why we're doing it. Is this something you might want to do? That's all. I just want to open the opportunity, not try to make somebody do this.
Yes, Commissioner.
Well, as far as your recommendation there, I think we have to look at the amount of involvement that it takes to put on the mock DUIs. I have been involved with them in my past occupation, and most certainly there's a lot involved with the sheriff's office, the DARE offices, the school administration, the paramedics, fire rescue. the theatrics, the volunteers to go through the process, the vehicles. It is a lot of work to get these things up and running. There are two. They have a tremendous impact on the students. It's probably, I understand that the attendance is mandatory, but it's the #1 attended event in the school, both schools. And I think that it is a direction to ensure public safety for these young individuals as they're approaching graduation. Fully support it, but I believe that in the spirit of cooperation, if we could invite St. Ed's to transport their students to one of the nearer mock DUIs, because there is a tremendous undertaking, it might address the need to have the St. Ed students or any other students in Indian River County that need to attend, as far as any of the charter schools as well, that we suggest a cooperative to have transportation to one of those two mock DUIs. Again, it takes a lot of personnel. There is a cost factor, and there most certainly is a lot of planning involved, and I believe that it would bring the students together by having the students that do not have the opportunity in their school to attend one of the other mock DUIs, and I believe the ultimate goal will be education and prevention.
Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that it is expensive. They are effective. And I would agree that it would probably be more efficient and effective to invite not only the other schools but the public. And I think most of these are advertised when they're having them.
Yeah.
I've attended them, and so I think it would be more efficient with two of them a year to invite people and make it a public notice.
Good point. And it always happens around prom time. All right. Is there any further questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll move on. We have the special districts and boards. Invitation from Johns Island Golf and Club to staff for staff participation in Public Safety Day.
Move approval.
Second. Got a motion to approve from Commissioner Solari, Wheeler, and a second from Commissioner Fletcher.
Yeah, I'm the one with the hair.
I know it. Throwing me off. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. Next, we have the Emergency Services Station 9 deductive change order number 2.
Move approval.
Second.
Got a motion to approve staff recommendation from Commissioner Solari with a second from Commissioner Wheeler. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The motion passes unanimously. Solid Waste District and Disposal District.
Approval.
Was that a motion to approve?
Yes. The minutes.
Got a motion to approve
Second.
the minutes from July 23rd, 2009 from Commissioner Fletcher and a second from Commissioner Wheeler. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. Item B2, 15B2, which is the authorization to Florida Power and Light to convert overhead lines to underground lines at the entrance of the yard waste facility on landfill property.
Move approval.
Got a motion from Commissioner Fletcher, and I'll second that. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. Next, work order number 12, final pay to Geo Syntech Consultants, Inc. for remedial action plan, modification and implementation for the former South Gifford Road landfill. Memorandum dated September 8, 2009.
Move approval.
Motion from Commissioner Solari with a second from Commissioner Fletcher. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. That was unanimous. Didn't sound like it, but it was. Next, we have the Solid Waste District Disposal District change order number 1 to Barth Constructions related to the expansion of the Fellsmere Customer Convenience Center. I would make a motion, but I can't.
Approval.
Thank you. I've got a motion from Commissioner Fletcher and a second from Commissioner Solari. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. That was much better unanimously.
Yeah, no.
Now, we have amendment number 2, which is work order number 1 for Brown Caldwell for the engineering services rendered to the expansion of the Fellsmere Customer Convenience Center.
Move approval.
Motion from Commissioner Solari with a second from Commissioner O'Brien to move staff approval. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Is there any further business to be transacted at this time? I now declare this meeting adjourned.